Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to be waiting a few minutes so that all the attendees can populate in. You're at Lambda LitFest panel, Politics, Activism, and Writing. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome. You are on the panel for Politics, Activism, and Writing for Lambda LitFest. We're just waiting a few minutes for attendees to enter the room. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lambda LitFest 2020. If you have not yet registered for tomorrow, please do for our panel on sex and the body. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lambda LitFest. We're just waiting a few minutes for attendees to enter the room. We'll be starting in about a minute or so. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Lambda LitFest. You're attending the panel on politics, activism, and writing. We're just waiting a few minutes for people to attend the panel. We'll be getting started in about a minute. All right, everyone, I hope you're having a good night. We are going to go ahead and get started in just a minute. Welcome, everyone. My name is Cynthia Guardado, and I am the event producer for Lambda LitFest 2020. Let us begin by acknowledging the traditional stewards of the lands we are collectively standing on. We show gratitude to the Tongva people, past and present, for caring for this place that was stolen from them and that we now call Los Angeles, and vow to help the Tongva gain federal recognition and autonomy. Please take a moment to acknowledge the ancestral people and land you are currently on by sharing their names in the chat.
Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for Lambda LitFest presents Politics, Activism, and Writing through a Black and POC Queer Lens. My name is William Johnson, and I'm the Deputy Director of Lambda Literary. And I'm thrilled to be your host for tonight's panel, which is part of this year's LitFest, which has been a week-long celebration of Black LGBTQ artistry. This year's LitFest has featured some of our community's most dynamic performers for a series of conversations on art making, happiness, and how to dismantle a white supremacist, ableist, cisgendered, heteronormative world. We have one more event tomorrow on Sex in the Body. Please visit lambdaliterary.org to register. We also want to let you know that a closed caption recording of tonight's event will be made available on our YouTube channel by the end of the week. Before we begin tonight, I want to thank LitFest event producer, Cynthia Gardardo, for everything they have done over the past few months to bring LitFest to life. It's a lot of heavy lifting, so thank you, Cynthia. You know, as a small LGBTQ arts nonprofit, we are also very grateful to our supporters. This year's LitFest is funded in part by an arts grant from the City of West Hollywood, as well as support from the California Arts Council and the Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs. So, you know, books have been central to queer people's lives, which is why I'm so proud to be a part of Lambda Literary. There is no other organization like this one. We lift up queer voices all year round through programs like the Lambda Literary Awards, which is the most prestigious prize for LGBTQ books. We also bring books into schools so that queer kids can see themselves reflected in the books they read. And we prepare future generations of queer writers by offering residencies and workshops exclusively for LGBTQ writers. These programs and others are made possible through the generosity of people just like you. I know times are tough for many of us right now, but if you're able to make a donation tonight, however small or large, please do. We've set up a special text code to make it easy. You can give directly from your phone by texting the word LitFest to 44321. That's LitFest to number 44321. Like many people and organizations, we are facing significant financial challenges. And as an organization, your donations keep us alive. Also, I want to remind folks to join the conversation in the chat and to let you know that there will be an audience Q&A session at the end of the general discussion. So please drop your questions in the Q&A box. And with that, I invite tonight's moderator, Zach Stafford, to the screen. Zach is an award-winning journalist who recently served as the editor-in-chief of The Advocate and the host of the morning show AM to DM.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, William, for that. So everyone, I'm Zach. I'm super excited to be here tonight and share the space with you all watching at home or wherever you're watching this fantastic program. And I'm really excited to be sharing this space with so many people I really love, whose work is really incredible in this conversation about politics, writing, and activism. So as many of you probably know or were watching, last night was our vice presidential debate, which is in the midst of our very turbulent 2020 election cycle, which makes this conversation really important and timely, I would say. But before we dive into everything that happened last night, including Mike Pence's fly moment or Kamala Harris's complicated relationship with the queer community and her own background, I'd love to introduce our esteemed panelists who are joining us tonight. So first up, I'd like to introduce edxi. edxi is a Afro-Pine Siksika trans multimedia culture worker. Her work entails political education while providing material support to marginalized and colonized communities, creating art and media for the sake of propagating resistance, culture, counter-narrative, and collective liberatory projects that spark discourse, sources of healing, critical thought, and dialogue, and mutual aid. Next is Kai Green, who is a writer, poet, filmmaker, and scholar. He is currently working on a memoir entitled A Body Made Home. He is an assistant professor of women's, gender, and sexuality studies at Williams College. Next, we have Faye Hernandez, who is an Inglewood-raised immigrant trans non-binary visual artist, writer, and healer. And finally, we have Ianne Stewart, who is a Black, queer, lesbian, and non-binary trans feminine New York-based storyteller working at the intersection of theater and activism, and the founder of the fabulous Oak Grove Project, and co-organized the Brooklyn Liberation, a rally for Black trans lives, where she delivered a speech in front of 15,000 people who gathered to March for Black Lives, and it was just really a historic moment for all of us. So before we get started, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that earlier today, we lost an icon in the space of Black queer writing and journalism, Monica Roberts. For those of you who are not aware of her work, she is a Black trans woman from Houston who created and ran the vastly important website, Transgriot, which has been the leader in journalism for queer journalism and journalism at large for years, and has been really heralded for her LGBTQ reporting for a long time. News of her death just broke a few hours ago, and I'd like to take a few moments to hold a moment of silence for her and the work that was so deeply important to many of us on this panel and those of us watching. So we'll just take a few moments here. All right, thank y'all for that. Okay, so to get us started, I'd love to begin the conversation on some joy. You know, I feel like we don't have enough conversations about joy when we talk about Blackness and queerness and resistance. So to get us going, I'd love to hear how all of you are keeping the joy alive in the midst of so much craziness. I know as artists, creators, as cultural makers, you're very much at the front lines of the work that people look to for their own inspiration and joy, but I'd love to know, how are you all taking care of yourself and providing joy? So anyone who would like to jump in, feel free to do so.
I'll start us off.
Faye, do it. Oh no, yeah, yeah, we'll go. All right, go for it.
Oh, sorry, did I interrupt someone who's starting?
No, you're good.
Okay,
You're
I'll just go for it. I think that joy is a very difficult thing to find these days, particularly with everything that is happening in the world. I lean on my friends. I lean on adult activities. I lean on just hope. I think that as an organizer, as someone who wants to make a change in the world for the better, you can't keep doing it if you don't have some hope. And so there has to be something worth fighting for. And the reminder of what that is, and the possibility that it offers, and lots of therapy.
That's great. Therapy is really important, super important. Edxi, what about you?
I think I garner joy from imagining futures, thinking of things, those futures coming, also friends, family, comrades, and just taking space to relax and process things. Trash television, reading lately, yeah.
That's great. That's really great. Faye, what about you?
So I have my first therapy appointment next week. So I hadn't done this, and I feel like I really needed it. And I'm really happy to just have heard back. And so that's bringing me so much joy. Just the fact that I'm like gonna do this, going to the beach. I just post up and bring my journal and just like sit. And also I've been just working with this mantra, like to hold joy as much as I do my pain, and finding what that means, because it's confusing for me. But I feel like there's an answer within that is allowing me to discover like what joy means to me in this moment, and how revolutionary it can be if I can harness it into my work and work that I want to put out.
Amazing, amazing. Congrats on therapy next week. Super, super important. All right, Kai, what about you?
Yeah, I will second everyone else on the therapy. I think therapy is so important right now if you are able to have access to it. Just a shout out to the National Queer and Trans Therapists of Color Network as a resource for folks looking for someone to talk to who's queer, trans, of color. That's been helpful for me. And speaking of joy, I think for me, the last actually couple of years, joy has been a challenge for me to access. And so I've been trying to figure out like how to enjoy the mundane and not necessarily look for the spectacular, but just to sort of be present to what is and try to, you know, make the most of it, because the world is changing so quickly and a lot of it is very scary, and mostly what it feels like is just being unsure. And in some ways that's great because we have, like Edxi was saying, this opportunity to basically dream these new freedom dreams and create new worlds. But at the same time, we're walking into things that we've never seen before, moments that we've never seen before.
That's so true. And, you know, speaking of dreams, that brings me to my first question. I'd love to start off with our conversation. And this question is really tied to the fact that we were all brought here together because we're all queer people of color who are also writers, among many other things. And I'd love to start off with our identities. You know, I remember as a young Black writer who had lots of dreams about what my future was going to be, I would be part of lots of conversations where people would ask writers why writers like us from marginalized groups had to be quantified or qualified as queer writers or queer writers of colors, and why we can't just be writers. But I think a lot of us here on this program do find a lot of power and joy and resistance in naming who we are. So I want to talk about that. And I'd love, Kai, for you to start off. I know you just went, but I'd love to start with you. Tell me more about your work and so much about what made you want to center us and create things for us, by us, and how did you know that was the place you wanted to go in this world and creating things for us?
Well, honestly, I think it came from understanding my own life story in relationship to larger structures of capitalism, just economic systems, and realizing how these larger structures actually affect my life and have affected my life in ways from the time that I was a child, especially when I think about education and access to education and experiencing different types of education. So coming out of a public school system in East Oakland, California that wasn't that great, and then moving into a private school sort of trend from that point, from sort of middle school on, it sort of gave me this understanding of the inequity that is sort of embedded in sort of geographically in terms of where we live, which determines like where you can go to school, but also of course, you know, how much money you have determines where you can go to school. But also what I found mostly is when I entered these sort of private elite institutions was that no matter what I had done in my public school, I would never be able to compete with what these people were doing in private school because they had access to so much. And so for me, everything I do is really a question of like access, and a lot of it comes from anger and being really and trying to work through a sort of kind of anger in terms of why don't certain people get access to certain things? Why is it that, you know, we have 2 or 3 people who we're gonna move on as these are our Black queer representatives, you know? So that's what really sort of pushes me, is really thinking about how do we make things more accessible to more people. Yeah, so I'll say that.
Yeah, no, and accessibility is super important in the work that all of you are doing, because, you know, it's one thing to do the work, but also making sure people can get to it and kind of get power from it is really important too. And Ian, that makes me think of the Trans Liberation March, which you co-organized with so many incredible people. And I'd love to hear more about that process, but also your larger work with the Okra Project, about doing similar work that Kai's talking about, you know, seeing your own, the structures that you existed and needing to tell your own story to push against them and change them.
Yeah, thank you so much. Ianne, like Leanne without the L. You got to make it a little bit more bougie, my love. Don't shorten it. Give it all of that zhuzh, darling. All that zhuzh.
I got it.
Thank you. So I think organizing the Brooklyn Liberation March was, or co-organizing it, excuse me. See how I just have to take credit for that? Look at me, a Leo. But co-organizing it was such a gift. I was really, it was, I don't think any of us had anticipated what it would become. And I think that it has definitely been sort of like this, it's been sort of that indescribable moment of just being in the presence of history. That's the thing I kind of keep on coming back to, and the gratitude of like being able to look out and be like, and interesting, it's kind of like when I was doing mine, you just kind of when like, much like when I'm performing, I just kind of black out and be like, okay, something happened, what's going on? You know, but getting to sort of stand back and watch my sisters, my siblings, my brothers, all of us sort of step forward and take up the mic and take up space. It was everything, and I'm just so grateful to Fran, to West, to Eliel, and to everyone, but particularly to those three who came to Black trans folks and said, we want to make this happen. We have the resources to make it happen. So you tell us what to do. And I think that that is what we need to see a lot more of, is people taking instructions on what we want to see have happen. And then I think you asked about Oka Project as well, that little organization that I've heard of. So keep on hearing so much about that. I don't know what's going on there. But the Oka Project is I founded it in 2018 with the intention of, you know, just being a cure for loneliness. It was never really about food insecurity for me. It was always about, you know, I get to go home for the holidays to a family that raised me and loved me. And I wanted to be able to provide an opportunity for folks to, you know, for Black trans chefs to go into the homes of Black trans people, and for all of us to feel just like a little less lonely. And it obviously grew a little bit more than I had expected. But we've kept it running. I've been really grateful during this time that we've been able to provide free therapy for Black trans people. We are in the final stages of sending out, you know, close, you know, a very sizable chunk of change that we will be announcing later in COVID-19 relief to Black trans folks. And our meal program is also about to be up and running again. So if you need therapy, if you need meals, or if you need some money, then, you know, for COVID-19 relief, please make sure to call the Oka Project.
That's amazing. It's amazing. I think I've donated to Okra Project. Everyone should donate. You should donate to Lambda Literary, but you should also give money to the Okra Project and just support all the girls out here. So a lot of what you were talking about is liberation, but liberation in action and liberation as love and all these other powerful things. And edxi, I'd love to hear about your own work. You know, you're very much centered on liberation as well. So how did you arrive to thinking about your own work as liberatory and also kind of as freeing folk?
Yeah, I think I kind of came to my work around the same time I did come to my gender nonconformity and transness, and I think the most integral thing to me was really centering what autonomy is and really fighting for something that I don't need an outside source to regulate or relegate, like who I am. And my practice has always been intrinsically linked to whatever I was, just whatever I was currently either going through, or if like, the specific identities that I held were something that was more than just the things that a lot of us are told to be. So yeah, it was really necessary to have those kinds of connections with other queer trans people of color. And learning that about myself, that I can actually, like, you know, put those things out into the world, whether they be through my art or my writing or performance. And I think I've just had a lot of fortune in the people who I've been working with. So yeah, I hope that's not like incredibly vague regarding like my my work that I do. But you know, just a lot of basically mutual aid work in the last decade or so. So yeah.
And Faye, you are last one for this round of questions. What about you? You are an artist who also openly talks about their immigrant experience. You are from Southern California. Talk to us more about your work, how you arrived here.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just a little cute, chubby, gay, had just came out as a gay and undocumented kid. It was like senior year, junior year of high school, and one of the teachers took us to the poetry lounge. So I'm sitting there looking at all these people, dope ass poets, like spitting fire, and I'm like, I haven't heard my stories, so then I guess I gotta write it. And that's where it happened. I'm like, I'm tired of reading all these white people in these books like John Steinbeck. I mean, I read House on Mango Street, and I was like, that's cute, but like, you know, like, what about me? I'm like, because I'm not, you know, what's her name, Esperanza? I don't know. But I was just like, I need these stories that are me, that are like inherently me. I grew up in Inglewood. My skin is white, but then I'm undocumented, and the invisibilization of like being undocumented and being hyper aware of cops and police, but then being queer and being visible. And I'm just like, girl, I need to hear and read these stories. So then, you know, I took it upon myself to just you know, it was healing for me. I feel like it was my way to return to self because of gender dysphoria, body dysmorphia, the dissociation that happens with all of this trauma that I'm just carrying. My life is a telenovela. So like, I felt like I had to find a way to put it together in a way that could help another little Faye out there. And so, you know, that's how I arrive at my work. It's a literally protest. It's me going on stage and being like, y'all need to get it straight. Like, this is what's going on. We're not considering all of these intersections of identities, like what's going on. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a love letter to myself, like the whole journey, and for my peoples, right? Like peoples that are like me, that aren't like me, and all the places where we meet. So yeah.
No, that's incredibly beautiful. And I think what you're describing is just brave. You know, a lot of folks that look like a bunch of us out here are told not to talk openly about ourselves, not to live so publicly, not to be so loud and all these things. You know, your story reminds me of a story that I think about a lot. Is when I was younger, my stepdad told me, you know, you should stop writing about being Black. You should stop writing about being queer. It's going to hurt your career. And I now laugh about it because I pay my bills doing this and I have a life. So he fucked up on that one. But, you know, what I was being told is something I hear a lot of young people hear over and over is like, don't be too much. So I'd love to hear from you all. Did you ever hear that growing up as young queer folks of color, young queer writers, queer creators? Were you ever told by anyone that you were too much? And how did you navigate that? And most importantly, how did you overcome that?
I feel like a lot of it, I mean, I'm still told that I'm doing too much or I'm too much, you know, it's like how it never stops, that kind of thing of saying that you encompass all of these identities, you're Black, Indigenous, Filipinx, like disabled, and so many, you know, like all of these intersections can often be too much to live through. But yeah, I think doing it in a way that's like honoring those identities, but going back to honoring the people who also carry the struggles of like living these ways, back to colonization and back to breaking those kinds of those kinds of curses, or those kinds of like cycles of abuse that we've been socialized within. I think countering those kinds of narratives are really important, especially right now, so that we can actually, not only are we healing ourselves, but we're healing each other, and then also like suturing up those, like the wounds of our ancestors. So, you know, do the absolute most, but also I feel like it's necessary to breathe and take your time. Yeah.
I'll hop in and I'll say that I think that in a lot of ways we are too much, and we sort of mark and demonstrate the excess of like capitalism, the excess of all of these different things, and that is sort of the beauty of being Black and queer and trans, is that we push the limits of what existence is possible. And so in that way, being too much is absolutely necessarily what we need in this moment. And so for me, I'm really more interested in how to be more of too much. Yeah, so I'll say that.
Anyone else? Feeling the spirit at all?
I'll hop on. Like even just earlier today, my homegirl's like, "You're too much, bitch," like, you know. And it's like, you know, just in the mundane and the day to day, I feel like I'm finally. This I think is also bringing me joy. Like, who is Faye just authentically without having to put up all these walls? Because it's my safety. I'm always so concerned that I've never allowed myself to be whole, and I think in these moments, it's laughable to look at all these people that were like, damn, you too much. And I'm like, yeah, I am. And I like want to be more. Like I'm popping. Like I want to see my potential and finally commit to what that is, because for so long, it hasn't been given to us these opportunities to be able to focus on ourselves. We're trying to find sustenance. We're trying to survive. We're trying to all of these things all the time, that just to have this luxury to like, yo, I'm my full self. Like it's amazing. The only other thing I want to touch on real quick is just I've been doing a lot of essay writing around like Mexicanidad, and I'm like, a bunch of people are probably going to think I'm a self-hating Mexican because I address the complexities of like national identity, culture, and then indigeneity within that and the colonization that happens. But I feel like that is the work, right? And when I bring that to the forefront, I get people like my mom. She's like, you extra, like, is your brain okay? Like, are you? And I'm like, it's necessary work. I'm like, this is too much, but this is what we need to be doing. Deconstructing all of these notions that we're comfortable with. Like, let's get uncomfortable and let's change some stuff. So yeah.
Is that scary though? You know, is it ever to hear that? I feel like you're getting pushback, but is it ever frightening?
Yeah, it's so scary. I'm like so terrified of all the recent work I've been doing, because it's just deconstructing all these things that people are comfortable with, like transness and the complexities of me, for example, being trans non-binary and having my beard and presenting how I want to, like, and then mix in immigration and undocumentedness and Mexicanidad and Latinidad, which is the fail, but so just like really complexifying things, and it's scary. It's super scary, but I think this is the work. This is how I show up for the protest. This is like I'm showing up to the computer.
Are there any kind of like advice you can give to, you know, folks who are wanting to be more, to get out there, to kind of be more present out in the world in this way? Is there any kind of best teachings and best practices you have for folks? Anyone?
Be audacious. I think have the audacity to take up space, have the audacity to, you know, be all of yourself, have the audacity to not ask permission for your existence, for your choices, for your joy, for your rage, for your sadness. Have the audacity to be everything that you could possibly dream and more. I mean, obviously, I've never known what it's like to be too much, but you know, for people who suffer from that, you know, do what you must.
Ashay.
That's great. So we have a few. Oh, so we can say something, Kai?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna respond to the question.
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
To say, like, one thing I would recommend to young writers is to, and people who consider themselves activists, which is a term that we can talk about in Q&A, but I'm interested more in organizers. But the thing I would say is study. And study doesn't just mean study books. It means like study as in walk around your neighborhood, get to know people. I think what and like what are what are the things that we carry with us as we relate to other people? Does that affect our ability to relate to other people and build new communities and new things? Like, what are the pains and hurts and scars that we carry into the new world that we're trying to create? And so I would say, like, study, but not study in some academic sense, although that is, you know, something that is cool to do too. But I think more importantly, I think a sort of like study of your own emotional intelligence and capacity and ability to relate and build loving relationships is really what's necessary for now.
That's beautiful advice. So we have a few minutes before we have to go to break. I'm trying to get a little, yeah, so we're going to break. So sorry. We're gonna take a 10-minute break, and then we're gonna come back, and we're gonna have a few more questions, talk about the election, talk about some politics, and then we'll have a Q&A. So does that sound good for everybody? Perfect, all right. So we'll be right back, everyone, so hold tight.
We are about to show you the Lambda Literary 30th anniversary video.
Lambda Literary traces its beginnings back to 1987 when L. Page Deacon McCubbin, owner of Lambda Rising Bookstore in Washington, D.C., published the first Lambda book report. The Lambda Literary Awards were born in 1989. The purpose of the awards in the early years was to identify and celebrate the best of lesbian and gay books in the year of their publication.
What literature has always taught us is that only in tracing our individuality can we become universal. Thank you.
The awards gave national visibility to a literature that had established a firm, if nascent, beachhead through a network of dynamic, lesbian and gay publishers and bookstores springing up across America. Lambda Book Report, meanwhile, grew into a comprehensive review periodical, and together the review and the awards cemented the reality that a distinct, definable LGBTQ literature existed. The award ceremony has consistently drawn an audience representing every facet of publishing. The awards honor some 24 categories reflecting the wide spectrum of LGBTQ books. From the very first year, the Lammies have made the statement that lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender stories are part of the literature of the world. In 2007, Lambda Literary founded its Writers' Retreat for Emerging LGBTQ Voices, a residency designed to offer intensive and sophisticated instruction to selected writers over a carefully designed one-week period. The retreat is intended to fill a void in the development of LGBTQ writers, offering instructive feedback in a supportive environment.
I always say that I recognize myself as a person of color and as a queer person and as a writer, but I've never really been brave enough to put all of those things together. And I think that coming here has really put all of those things together for me.
In 2012, Lambda launched the LGBTQ Writers in School program, where queer writers visit K-12 classes or queer youth organizations to discuss LGBTQ literature with young people. In 2017, the first Lambda LitFest took place in Los Angeles, featuring a week of readings, discussions, workshops, and other performances across the city. With the clarified mission, Lambda Literary fully intends to earn its acknowledged position as the world's premier LGBTQ literary organization.
Anne Herbert once said, "We can cry for 1,000 years or have an accurate laugh." My goal has always been to write that sentence that causes that accurate laugh. Because brevity is the soul of wit, I thank you so much for this award. Thank you.
After the intermission, there will be a few more questions from the moderator, and the conversation will be followed by an audience Q&A. You can find the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Please post all of your questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat, so that we can ask them. We also want to let you know that we are posting closed caption recordings of all LitFest events on our YouTube channel throughout the week. And if you are able to donate to Lambda, you can do so by texting the word LitFest to 44321. That's LITFEST to the number 44321. Our intermission will be over in about 30 seconds. If all the panelists can return to their seats. Please unmute your video and audio. Please unmute your video so we can see all of you. Perfect, thank you.
All right, we are back. Hope everyone enjoyed their break. Hope people like cooked dinner or whatever during that very long time away. All right, so to get us back going in this last half of this, we're going to do quick conversation to keep talking, and then we're also going to do audience Q&A in like 25 minutes. So feel free to stop dropping in questions if you have it, and we will get to those very, very soon. All right, so to start us off on this part, you know, so much of writing, when we talk about it, is about the writer, who they are, what their identities are, etc. But I want to talk to y'all about the audiences or who you're making work for. You know, we said this already, but we live in a world that people assume is consisting of an audience that is only white, able-bodied, straight, rich, all these other things until proven otherwise. So I'd love to hear from each of you about how in your own work you are pushing against that narrative, how you're thinking about the audiences and who you're making work for and who those people are, and when you began to think about that part of like the who of all of this. Who would like to go?
I'll start us off. I think, I don't know if there was ever a time that I wasn't thinking about who would be reading my work. I mean, I've never had small ambitions. And so I was always aware that, you know, my work, you know, if it were to reach kind of the places that I wanted it to reach and have the influence I wanted it to have, that there would be a necessity of understanding the context in which my work would be consumed. But I think also there's a difference between who like you are writing for and then who, and then the context in which your work is being consumed. I think that the reality is that, you know, the revolution will not be televised, nor will it be written, nor will it be, you know, the reality is that our work, we can make waves, we can make moves, but I believe that a lot of the most crucial work that's going to be happening in this time is not work that's going to be given a blue check or or, you know, amplify, you know, it's all the things that are happening in those small pockets, like the grassroots work. But I think that it's also necessary for us who are given a platform, or, you know, whatever it is that we are given and whatever access we have, that we absorb the context in which our work is being consumed, but never allow that to change who we write for. And I've always written for little girls like me from Birmingham, Alabama, who wanted to see themselves splashed across pages and screens, and wanted to dream of, you know, lives that were possible beyond them. And I want to encourage those girls like me to be happy, to be joyful, to be audacious, to not necessarily feel like they have to leave the South, but to make the South their home, even though I am a girl who left the South. But yeah, I think that who I write for is a much smaller number than who I recognize I have to be aware of. Not necessarily think of, not write for, but to just be aware of. You know, I think that we have to be aware of, you know, what we bring into the spotlight. I think that there's been a lot of conversation, particularly around like shows like Pose, for example, where it's like, what is the effect of bringing ballroom into the mainstream? Does it, you know, who loses access as a result of that? Which is not to shit on anybody, that's just to be like, how are we aware of how our work is being consumed in mainstreams and larger spaces?
Edxi, you're really shaking your head. I have to ask, what's going through it? What are you feeling? What is the spirit moving you to say?
Yeah, I mean, within the context of who I, write for, I really just feel like the audience that I write to is what I want to see in myself. I write to change people's minds. And what I mean by that is, I have a really conflicting relationship to the written word, more so than I do have with the spoken word. And I think like Kai knows a little bit about some of my conflicting feelings with like the written word, and how it kind of like, because of how stagnant it can be, it kind of can shape our entire universe, and our entire world is kind of, our materiality is often guided by the kind of colonial fantasies of white men's law and order. So like, you know, and like, I just really obviously when writing, like wanting people to shift perspective and, you know, really think critically about the imaginaries that they're actually living in, the kind of like scriptures that they're living by. And like I would hope that it has, it does change, but also like, you know, I think that, you know, I think it's a good point of like actually being aware of like how mainstream might consume that and or co-opt and use your own stories or your own narratives against you, or in having it consumed in a way that becomes that kind of spectacle that we were talking about a little bit earlier about, where it focuses so much on the great spectacle of pain or suffering, and doesn't encompass like all of who we are. So, you know, for me, like in the context of the political climate as it is, I would say that like what I'm writing about and who I'm writing for is like, you know, is always centered around anti-capitalism or anti-colonial, having an anti-colonial lens. And even if it means using like these kinds of colonial tools for you to see that, I'm gonna try to do that. And you know, it is kind of like, well, fuck it, like people aren't really going to hear me, or they're going to have cognitive dissonance when I talk about how like voting is inherently, you know, colonization, or it only perpetuates or holds up and reifies colonization. People don't want to hear that. So it's like, who am I talking to when I write critiques about voting, for example, as like a state-oriented solution that's actually trapping us in colonial dystopia? I'm not writing it for the people who are comfortable. I'm writing it to make people uncomfortable enough to think and to just like wallow in their cognitive dissonance of that kind of anti-colonial logic. But yeah, I guess that's check.
Check. That's great. That's great. Faye, what about you? How are you dealing with this whole conversation of who you're writing for, who the audience is, who it's not, all of these things?
Yeah, I feel like, so like, for example, in like my dedication for my first full-length poetry collection that just came out, I'm writing for anybody in the margins, anyone who's in this liminal space of identity that needs a home, like, you're welcome here. And so I think that a lot of my work, I love your response, edxi. It's like, it's not like one particular, I'm obviously addressing things from my lens, but I'm breaking everything apart. I've even broken myself into pieces to understand like, well, what is my role and what voices need to be centralized in my stories. If I'm writing about Inglewood, I'm writing about Black folk. I'm writing about the indigenous people that lived here before. If I'm writing about Inglewood, yeah, it's my hood, but then that's me post-immigrating, post-being undocumented, post all of these lands and histories on top. And for my, for example, my job is just to like unearth that and just showcase it and say, whoever like, vibes with this transparency and with this kind of like deep deconstructing and then restructuring, then like, this is for you. Because there's so many people that don't feel like they feel enough of anything. Like, I don't feel quote unquote Mexican enough, or I don't feel trans enough, or I don't feel, and I think a lot of my work in the way that I write and how I'm centering love, I'm building a home every step of the way, and I'm saying I belong fully as I am, and you do too. And so I feel like I try to angle it in this like tenderness and this love and this, like, I'm gonna call you out, but like, let's do some work. And I hope that just like I showcase that I can deconstruct myself, you take it upon yourself to do the same, because we all need to be doing this in order to be able to live these reimagined worlds or these new worlds. I want to get to the new world. And so like, I'm doing my part. Are you? Like, that's kind of like who I'm writing for, it's an umbrella of folk.
I love it. I love it. And I love this idea of deconstructing yourself and kind of holding yourself accountable through the work, because that is a great segue to Kai, who I know works in academia, which is its own complicated system, and you produce a lot of work in that space. And your work, I feel like, really challenges the structures that it's being produced in and built around and all this stuff. So I'd love to hear how you're navigating kind of reimagining academia within the space of writing there.
Yeah, I mean, I think academic writing has always been a challenge for me. I am someone who is just challenged by the mode that most academics are sort of required to write in order to get tenure, right? If you are lucky enough to get a tenure track job, or lucky enough, there are certain requirements. And so currently, I'm not writing an academic book. I'm working on a memoir, which is, sort of a thing that a lot of people wouldn't do in my position as a junior faculty, but I'm writing for different reasons and different purposes than just for tenure. But that's also a risk, right? It's a risk in terms of being safe under capitalism. And so I would say that there are just like many different people that I'm writing for. So some of the people that I'm writing for are in the academy and do feel like they want to speak in a different way, and they want to be involved in these conversations and actually change how these conversations are happening. Particularly like my younger students, are really interested in working with language and seeing what language can do or what you can do with language in a liberatory way. I would also say that I write for Black folks, for poor folks, for people who at one time or another really didn't believe certain things were possible, and for people who, you know, need help in learning how to dream. And I write not just for other people, but for myself, right? So I've been in sort of a writer's block mode, and I realize that that's really connected to my relationship, my creative source, imagination, ability to dream or think of new things in this moment. And so I think part of my writing practice is to study what it means to write, and what about the writing is a healing process for me, and what about the writing is for other people to share with other people. And I think also what was said earlier in terms of you may write with these certain intentions, but when you let your work out into the world, it takes on a life of its own, which is also its own interesting thing. The last thing I would say is that I think for me, one of the most important things about writing is documenting our lives, our stories, and our histories, particularly in places where we are thought to be unimaginable. So for my academic research, I did an ethnographic study of Black LGBT space and placemaking in South LA or South Central LA, which included interviews and just basically what some ethnographers would call a deep hanging out. And really it's about building relationships and getting to know people and figuring out how for me, the question was, really, when I was thinking about South Central LA and Black folks who were creating community there, I was really thinking about the 80s and how did people survive the HIV/AIDS crisis, and how were people able to build and create informed community that was in Black space, that wasn't in West Hollywood or the Castro or the Village, but was in South Central LA, right? And those are often places that we think of queerness is unimaginable, but we know that we're everywhere. So what happens if we actually refocus ourselves geographically? What is possible? What do we learn?
I love that. I love that. You know, your response is making me think about this next question I had already planned, but now it feels really prescient to ask, and it's about, you know, Black and queer writing as resistance. You know, we hear this a lot, that we all live in a white supremacist society. So our existence as Black queer folks is a form of resistance when we wake up every day and live our lives. And by that virtue, the work that you all are creating is also very much a form of resistance. But let's talk about that. You know, what does it feel like as creators to always have your work be looked at as political, as a resistance, as resistance are in some ways? And is there ever a moment in which we as queer folks of color, as queer creators, are creating something that is not innately political? Can it exist outside the political kind of moment here in an American context?
I'd almost flip that question around and ask, I mean, like, what writing isn't in some ways political? I think that often we just give the luxury of like apolitical like writing to white people because they are considered a standard. If we don't see whiteness as a standard, their work is equally as political because it is often what erases us the most. It is a political decision not to include Black, queer, trans, indigenous, disabled, different, you know, any you know, insert here, not to minimize those identities, but like, you know, it is inherently political to not include. If you asked a painter to paint you an apple on a wooden table and they only used the color green, you wouldn't say that that is a good painter. You would say that that painter doesn't know what the fuck they're doing. But like, you know, because white people are considered some kind of bizarre standard by which we all have to, like, you know, compare ourselves to, they can paint with, you know, they can just like hang a canvas up and say, this is art. And somehow we're supposed to believe that when, you know, we as Black, Indigenous, and of color creators are actively creating work that is as multifaceted as the world that surrounds us. So I don't feel any particular way about my life being political, because I was never under the impression that I was going to be anything other than political. I don't think that there's anything wrong with being political. I quite enjoy taking up some space and getting a little political. You know, I think about the late, you know, John Lewis, who talks about getting in good trouble. You know, I really love getting in good trouble, and I intend to get in good trouble for quite a long time. So that's fine, baby. I am. And now what you gonna do about it?
I love that. I love that. Anyone else?
I mean, I wonder what the relationship here is between political and radical. Because I think everything that was said, I really agree. Like, just because I'm Black, I'm trans, I'm queer, I'm all these different things. Anything that I say, anything that I do, it's political, because I am non-normative. I am already a sort of challenge to the system. I am a challenge to what it means to be human. And so no matter what, I would say that's political, but I also would, I mean, this is a question that I have when we say political. What do we mean when we say political? Do we mean radical? Do we mean, I don't know. What do people mean when they mean, is it political?
I feel like political means to me how you are shaping your environment, and then what particular underpinning logics are you using to shape your environment, to reimagine your environment. So like, as much as I do believe, like, I do believe that through our identities, we are shaping the world, or we are inherently political. But I also want to trouble like how, in what ways we are, because, you know, not every single Black person or even Indigenous person is troubling the logics of colonization, or is troubling the status quo, for example. So it really I feel like the context determines, or, you know, in terms of politics, like, you can be radically minded, you can be a radically minded person, and have these thoughts and ideas that want to like uproot particular interrelated systems of domination. But you can, if your praxis is, you know, kind of following what the standards are, or what the status quo is, if your only form of quote unquote resistance is to utilize the solutions granted to us by oppressive forces, then like, what kind of change is that? Are you actually radically reimagining our future, or are you just kind of shifting around what problems are solution, or are problems / solutions that are kind of imposed on us by our oppressors? I feel like there's so many solutions that are insidiously being thrown at us by people who have the power, institutional power and institutional clout, that shapes our actual like resistance to it. And like, I think there's so much that, yeah, we need to like look into and search deep into regarding just the kind of worldviews that we're using. Because like, as much as I want to work with people or coalition build, like I've really seen how there are so many tensions when it comes to underpinning logics and worldviews that having like a kind of mass-based coalition is impossible because there's always people that are trying to legitimize and or build up or take on and work in congruence with the things that people like us or even just myself alone are trying to destroy. So yeah, so
I love all of that so much, and I think we only have a few more minutes before we go to Q&A. But I began this conversation by bringing up last night's election or debate, which should feature Senator Kamala Harris, who's the first woman of color to be on stage and the first woman of many to be on many stages like that. And I feel like she's like a perfect example of what we're talking about alongside like a Pete Buttigieg. This is a politics and writing conversation, and we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the election. So I think, like, what do we all think about kind of this moment in the political narrative where we are seeing people who are representative of our communities rising up, but as you're saying, edxi, kind of coalesce around these systems of power that are going to harm us in the long run? How do we sit in community with all of them as we all are living in public together and creating a public together?
I think we have to be really careful about politics of representation and to not be fooled by certain kinds of representation, even and even be aware when we are being used as that sort of representational force. Because I can recognize the moments in which I am being used symbolically as the Black trans person, and you can strategically use that position to do something different. But it's also at the same time, you recognize like this is a particular kind of politic that is about a visual sort of representation, and it doesn't necessarily go deeper than that. So just because you and I are Black, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have the same kind of desires for a new world. Like it doesn't mean that. So I think our connections need to be deeper. So we need to have a deeper understanding of what it is we want. And we can't just base it off of how we look or how we identify, because that does not determine our politic or our ethic or the way we will reimagine or want to imagine the world.
Anyone else?
Okay.
That was great.
Oh no. I feel like you're gonna tear this one up, baby. So you go ahead.
Go ahead. edxi, take this.
Tear it up.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that perspective or that critique of representative politics because I very rarely see that in the mainstream. I'm very angry at what the kind of current conversations that are floating around Kamala Harris and people who have invested deeply into the state and militarization being lauded as like, oh yeah, you're the first. It's like we already had the first Black president. Like I don't care for a first Black transgender person within like a white normative like colonial genocidal space. Like it's like I was giving an example of, we're being used instead of building our own power. We're actually kind of just being assimilated into coercive power that it's really very much like, I always bring up the example of like a terrible relationship you don't want to have with someone, like the powers that be or the ruling class or the state or whatever you want to call it, the thing that's like, I don't know, I'm just like, we have Instagram, we have social media, we have the news. Everyone is saying vote right now. And I don't need to tell you to do that, because all of these institutions that are tied to statehood and colonization are doing the damn work of selling you that solution. Like I don't need to do that. So like, I guess I'm consistently, yeah, like in kind of like this loop of like, you know, every 4 years, like a lot of liberals or conservatives or people who want to utilize the kind of strategies that are given to them by statehood or what have you, the nation state, they're like, do this thing, and then they're literally willing to ignore or kick aside a lot of the like autonomous mutual aid work out in direct action that has been created outside of voting. And despite some of the problems that, you know, have been imposed on Black, Indigenous, queer, trans people, I'm just mad that like for whatever reasons we're allowing the same things that criminalized us, that took away our actual personhood, that looted us, that we are actually still trying to reify and utilize these strategies that it's selling us, giving us to quote unquote get free or to live okay. It's very coercive. But you know, I mean, so I guess the solution is just is think deeply, create those connections, read more critical theory. I don't know. I don't have a lot of things to end in a happier context that doesn't feel like I'm like, you know, wagging my finger at people, but it's like, you know, I'm not, these ideas that I have, they're not sustained or supported by the institutions that are standing, that are inherently white supremacist, capitalist, ableist, normative, heteropatriarchal, like they're, you know, so I would hope that people recognize the marginalization of that and like maybe want to think outside of that kind of ballot box. That's all.
First of all, yes, I knew you was going to tear it up and you tore it up, so that's that on that. But I think I think something I hold in one hand is that I do believe that, you know, for my elders, I do believe in the importance that they fought for and what feels important to them. I do believe that just like I do believe there is a value for them and for my elders and for the people who come before me who did fight for these rights, like, and what this means for them and how this empowers them to live their lives in a better way, in a fuller way. And I think that if there is any value in it whatsoever, I think that that is the only value in this political theater, is that it may provide some of our elders who have waited to see a day like this or waited to see a symbol like this, that it feeds them. And so I think that there is value in that. Other than that, I think that Kamala is essentially white people's excuse to believe that Black women will continue to clean up after their mess. And I think that we are, so many of the people that surround me, so many of the Black trans people that I'm in community with, continue to say over and over again that, child, it don't matter which way it goes, either way, my life's not really going to change. And I was raised and adopted by a white woman, and when speaking to her last night, you know, she's you know, her heart is full, and she's like, Kamala was amazing, she whooped his ass. And I'm telling her, Mama, what does that do? That's just for you, that's not for me. And to sit her down and try to explain to her, you know, which I didn't spend too much time doing, to be clear, I had other things to do on my evening. But, you know, I think just to kind of I appreciate my relationship with her, because it does give me a glimpse into like what white America is doing, and white America is continuing to ask Black women to be their mammy, to be the person to clean up their mess. And white America is looking to go back to what they had before. But the reality is that for Black trans people, for Black queer people, for Black people, prior to this, Kamala was still putting us in jail. Kamala's hobby is jail. Obama's hobby was war. Like, these Black people were still killing, we're still seizing wars, we're still ignoring our lived experiences. Like, this is the fact that we live in a society where Trump is, for us, it doesn't, for that whether he's in office or out of office doesn't really mean that much to us, should be an eye-opener for a lot of people, that make them say, what kind of world do we live in? But instead, yet again, we treat young, Black, queer, trans people as if we just need an education, and if only we knew better. We know better. We know better than you do. And that's why we're looking at this situation saying, well, this don't change nothing for us. So I think that, you know, it is an exhausting form of gaslighting to be constantly, you know, made to feel that our lived experiences are not important. When we have watched over and over again candidates be given the platform to do something that drastically shifts and changes literal slavery, literally slavery just transformed into the police system. It is, a documentary was made in Hollywood. If Hollywood can understand what the police force is and Cop Mala can't, then I don't know what you want from me, boo. That's not my vice president. That's not someone I care about. What? There's a documentary. Hollywood made it. Go watch it. Slavery still happening. It's just not that difficult. The thing is that we're just trying to return to comfort when we didn't have to see all of these people. And so all these people who want to do this, I'm the person on the other side of that hand. All of us sitting here on the other side of that hand. So fuck you and Kamala, truthfully.
So we only have a few more minutes left. And there's one Q&A question that I think ties perfectly with what was just said. You know, a lot of, I think what we're talking about is the fact that representation can many times mask the replication and the continuation of oppressive and destructive power structures. Just because, you know, Kamala is Black and a woman, does that mean she cannot replicate the power structures that came before her? And this person who wrote in anonymously has a question about writing and similar powers. So they write, how can we create a language through our writing that challenges the dominant hegemony and creates paths for looking at ourselves and our world in new ways as to form an alternative narrative? So the question here is how through your own work are you trying to step outside of these power structures and using your work to reimagine them so that we can all not replicate some of these oppressive structures? Or your work at large, even outside of writing.
Well, I would say one of the things is, like I said earlier, sort of thinking about in this moment, what we want our history, how do we want our history to be archived, documented, saved? How do we want it to be passed down? How do we want it to be protected? How do we want to sort of hold on to the things that are precious to us in this moment and pass them down to other generations, and take the tools and the lessons that we've learned and pass them down, so we don't have to keep learning them over and over again in the same way. The other thing I would say is, you know, for me in the academy, one of the things that I do as a writer that I love to do is write with other people, which is sort of looked down upon. But I think it's really important because writing can be a really solitary sort of endeavor. I think it's really important to be in conversation with other folks. So whether it be like writing groups or anything like that, but to definitely be in conversation with other people so you're not just sort of siloed out there is a really important thing. And understanding that I think we have examples of some really great counter narratives and different kinds of histories that we can look to, particularly our Black feminists, women of color feminists, writers, thinkers, theorists, artists, have so much to tell us about the world globally, have so much to tell us about reproduction, have so much to tell us about gender identity and gender roles. One of my favorite essays actually is from Toni Cade Bambara, and it's called On Roles, and it's about gender roles, and it's in an anthology that she edited in 1970 called The Black Woman. But I think Black feminists have always been doing some just work that is ahead of its time, particularly when it comes to questions around gender.
Okay, let's go to, thank you for that, Kai. Let's go to another question since we have a few more minutes left. Oh, this is cute. Feline writes, what advice would you give your teenage self if you could travel back in time? And what might your future self tell you now about this moment in history personally or based on the current global health situation? I guess just like, what would you tell your teenage self? If you go back, talk to that person, what would you say? What advice, what warning, what person would you say never talk to, don't text them back? What would happen?
Take the moans now, girl.
Boy.
Take the moans now.
That part too. Pop a moan and don't fall in love with that white boy. You wasting your time. You a lesbian, girl. You a lesbian. You don't want that man. That's what I would say. Pop a moan. Don't date that white boy. Don't fall in love with that white boy, and just love yourself. You a lesbian, girl. God damn. Just admit
it. I would say similar things. Definitely, yeah, I think just get ready. Just get ready. Get ready for what you're about to see, what you're about to go through. You know, brace yourself, really. You think you have things difficult now, you think your world is like intense right now. Just brace yourself. And maybe squat more. I don't know.
I feel like I tell myself to continue being so explosive. Like, I feel like I just like let myself be, you know, and I think I'm very grateful for that Faye for allowing this Faye to, now I could like chill in myself more comfortably a little bit more. So just, you know, continue being inquisitive and angry at the world and burning shit down and performing on stages earlier and just being loud and not giving a fuck. Just like, do you, boo. It took me a while to get to where I am now. So, you know, maybe I'd be like, get comfortable a little bit sooner, but that's about it.
And I think I'm sort of along the lines of edxi, and as soon as you asked the question, my first thing that came to my head was, it gets worse. And that's kind of a pessimistic thing to say, but I think it's a really honest thing to say. But just because things might get worse around us, it doesn't mean that we have to get worse. I think it means we have to be more intentional about how we care for ourselves and care for each other, and think about the sort of grace that we give to one another. But I really, really think, particularly in this time, we have to think about our mental health and how our mental health is being affected by the environment around us and everything that's changing, and people who have already had struggles with mental health previous to this moment, and how those things can be being compiled in this moment. And so how do we support each other right now in those ways?
All right, I think this may be our last question, but we'll see how this goes. But I love this question. So I think this came up earlier about futures, and I think futures for Black queer folks of color, everyone, is a really powerful thing. It's a form of resistance when you speak about your future. And this person really wants to know, Darius Caffey, based on the work that you're doing right now, where would you like to see yourself and your work in the future? What are you manifesting tonight?
I would like to be irrelevant, because I would like that to mean that we live in a society where my work is no longer needed.
Yo, that's it. That's that's a wonderful place to be. Maybe also for me, like, yeah, no, that really trumps it. I really like that. Just like, I don't have to like, be doing these be like, it's just all in unison. We're all like doing this kind of, mutual reciprocity and supporting each other. Land back, Black liberation, Black autonomy, Indigenous autonomy, trans women, being safe, trans feminine people, not having to hide who we are from jump. So just I think with work I'm doing now, I think it's like, just, I don't know. I think the other answer just hit so hard. So I'm gonna take that.
I agree. That answer was just on it. Like, I used to tell my students all the time, I'm like, do y'all think I want to write? Like, do y'all think I want to go on a stage and be doing this shit? I'm like, I'm tired. Like, I don't want to be doing this. I'm like, but, if we could get to this future where we're all chilling by the beach and everyone brought food and we're all just like, stargazing and, my first response to like, when you asked, I was like outer space. Like, that's what I just like went there and I'm like, we're all just kind of floating and everything is nice and we're gooch because we're like doing the work together to stay afloat and stay connected. And that's just what I picture. We're all just chilling by the beach, enjoying it.
I second all the things that have been said. I want to be chilling the fuck out. I want to be relaxing. I want, my ideal thing would be to have like a retreat space for Black, trans, queer folk, and I would just stay there. Like, I would never leave. I would just be there, and my job would be to be the permanent relaxer. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what we all really need and deserve, and capitalism has violently taken away from us is time. Time to sit with our thoughts, to sit with our feelings, to sit with all of these things. We haven't been, many of us aren't given the time, the luxury and privilege of time. So that's what I want for my future.
I love that. Well, thank you all so much for that. And I just want, for everyone watching, all the people watching, I think we don't center those answers enough in conversations like this. I think there are a lot of panels, especially lately, where Black folks, Black queer folks are asked to come and talk about trauma and violence and how to survive and all this. And I don't think we do enough of this, which is future dreaming and just saying, you know what, girl, I just want to just go home with a man and lay in bed and eat some ice cream or something, whatever that is for you. Whatever.
Not a man, never a man, not a man. Oh,
I was speaking for
not
myself.
a man.
I was speaking for myself as a single person. So that was really me manifesting my future.
Not in this economy.
Well, thank you all so much for this. This has been really, really incredible and, just really soulful. And I just appreciate all the work that you all did today, will continue doing, and please reach out to everyone here and everyone watching, support these folks, slide into Venmos, cash apps, whatever you need to do to feel good, do that for them. I want to say thank you so much to Lambda Literary for creating this space and also a week-long program of spaces like this. Tomorrow's program is Sex in the Body, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you all can tune into that at a similar time. Yes. Yep, that was right. Great. And William is here. So William, there you go. Mm-hmm. Are you doing the final? Are you saying goodbye, William?
Yes, I'm closing it out. I'm closing it out. So I just want to thank you all. I want to thank all the panelists. This has been a fantastic discussion. I want to thank all the audience for coming out tonight. And I hope you join us, as Zach mentioned, for our last panel, which is tomorrow. You can register at lambdaliterary.org. And if you have not made a donation yet and you would like to, please do so now by texting the code LitFest to 44321. Even giving a little as $10 ensures that we can keep bringing you programs like tonight's and the years ahead. We can continue to do this great work. So thank you, have a great evening, and continue the fight.